Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Lean Business Agility. Today from Florida with Dan Vacanti. Hi Dan.
Hi Klaus.
Thanks for spending a couple of minutes with me and talking a little bit about Lean Business Agility.
Right. Thanks for having me. Too bad we're not out on the beach where it's a little bit warmer, a little bit sunnier, but
it is,
whatever.
Yeah. But
they'll have to just take our word for it that we're in sunny South Florida, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can imagine it. It's sun out there.
Yeah.
So what is the topic we want to talk about today? I thought talking about system stability would be very nice.
Okay.
So I do 1 or 2 training classes a year, maybe even a little bit more.
I don't know.
And
I thought it was just one. Okay,
yeah.
but okay. Yeah.
No, I'm doing quite a lot of training classes, of course. And one hot topic is, of course, always we need to run a stable system because otherwise everything is just not working.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, can you explain what is a stable system?
There's essentially 2 things that I look for in system stability. The first, which is I'm sure you talk about in your training classes, is the fact that can I use my hands?
Do it.
The arrival rate to your process roughly equals the average arrival rate to your process roughly equals the average departure rate or the average completion rate. You don't want stuff coming into your process faster than stuff is leaving your process, because that is one clear sign that your system is unstable. There are all kinds of bad things that happen when that occurs.
But why should we care?
Because I said so.
Okay, that's a good. That's a very good point.
Like I said, you should,
maybe you have one more argument.
well, like I said, you should care again from a predictability perspective. Well, first from a predictability perspective, because anytime you have the situation where stuff is arriving to your process faster than stuff is leaving your process, you're in this world where your cycle times or lead times or whatever you want to call them are going to be constantly increasing over time. So, if your viewers out there are familiar with a cumulative flow diagram, for example, you will have 2 lines on your cumulative flow diagram, and if your top line is your arrival rate and your bottom line is your departure rate, then anytime you have arrival rate that is more than departure rate, you'll see lines on your cumulative flow diagram diverging like this, right? Whenever you have 2 lines on your cumulative flow diagram diverging like this, that's when your cycle times will increase over time.
Okay.
If you have them parallel, then your cycle time will stay relatively stable. Your average cycle time.
Okay, this makes sense.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so arrival rate and departure rate should be equal. Is this the one and only condition for a stable system?
It is not, from my perspective anyway. There are actually a couple more, but the other one that I would say pay attention to the most, other than arrival rate and departure rate, is the average age of the items that are in your process. So over time, the average age of the items that are in your process should not be increasing or decreasing over time as well.
So average age means, let's assume there's a column and I have 2 items in this column. And if one item is just staying there and the other items is always overtaking one item, then they are not of the same age, right?
Correct.
So how does age differ from cycle time then?
Age differs from cycle time. So cycle time is calculated once something has exited your process. So when something has exited our process, hopefully we've taken a timestamp when it's entered our process and we've taken a timestamp when it exits our process. When we have those 2, we can calculate a cycle time. So cycle time is always for items that have fully exited the process. Age is for those items that have entered the process but have not yet exited. So what is the amount of elapsed time that an item has been in your process but it hasn't yet exited?
Okay, so age is something like current date, today minus start date.
Exactly.
That's the age.
Yep. And so you want to pay attention to that, because like you said, in the case where we have items that are just stuck in your process, just staying there, that's going to really screw up your predictability. Can I say screw up? Is that okay? That's going to really screw up your predictability, because eventually that item that is sitting there in your process, eventually it's going to finish. But when it finishes, it's going to finish with a radically different cycle time than what we were expecting because of all the other items that we had seen before it. So it's important. Those two things conjunction are important because you can have a situation where you have two lines parallel on your cumulative flow diagram and you think, hey, great, I'm stable, right? But you're really not because you're not paying attention to the average age of items in your process.
Okay, nice. What I understood, it's important that departure rate and arrival rate somehow are equal, yeah?
Yep, correct.
And the average age does not increase or decrease, right? So now we are in a stable system.
Yes.
But why would we need this? What for?
Yeah, so there were, before we talked a little bit about from a predictability perspective, and when I say predictability, it's essentially around answering that question, when will it be done? Right?
Yeah.
So, and that's why we had a whole conversation about cycle time and how system stability aids you in cycle time. Cycle time is all about answering that question, when will it be done, for a single item, for a given item. The other benefit of having that stable system, however, is we also need to answer the question, when should we begin something? And if we're in an unstable system where stuff can just begin whenever we want it to, then that is yet another thing that is going to screw up our predictability.
Can we actually say when we need to begin?
Absolutely, because one of the ways that we are going to match the tool that we have to match arrival rate to departure rate is essentially the work in progress limits in our process, right?
Yeah.
And as you know, those work in progress limits are going to govern when we are allowed to pull new work into our process. So assuming that we have work in progress limits set, and more importantly, assuming that we're paying attention to those work in progress limits.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Then those the actual WIP, based on those work in progress, the actual WIP that we have in our system, when compared to what those work in progress limits are going to signal when we should pull something in. Now, having a stable system makes a difference from the perspective of now not only do we know when we should pull something in, but that's also probably the appropriate conversation about what should we be pulling in. Right? That's probably a different video.
Yes,
would be my guess, is the whole prioritization. How do we know what to pull in?
Yes.
But the fact that we have a stable system, or the fact that we've set up our system to be stable, that's going to give us that clear indication of when we should have those conversations about what's the right time to pull something.
That makes sense. I mean, I kind of like how you approach this, because what I see in reality quite often is that the problem, okay, people always want to know when it is finished, but I think it's way more important to know when we start, because what I see quite often is there is a fixed finishing date, but we don't start at the date we want to start. So often we delay projects because we start too late.
Yes.
When it comes to forecasting, I don't try to forecast a date, I try to forecast a duration. And depending on the start date, your
yes.
end date might vary.
Yeah. And
Does this make sense?
Exactly. And that's kind of the unintuitive part from a metrics perspective, but just from an overall process thing that we talk about is you're usually much more predictable if you don't start stuff immediately.
Yes.
That's very uncomfortable for people.
Yeah.
But they need to understand that is exactly the case. Just because your customer asks something of you now doesn't mean you should start it right now. In fact, you can not only can you get it done more predictably, but you can usually get it done faster if you don't start it right now.
Yeah, and there's this connection again to Little's law, of course.
Of course.
Because if I start something immediately, means my work in progress goes up. What is the consequence if work in progress goes up? Cycle time goes up, right?
Okay, yeah,
so
exactly.
okay, and I think that's really a problem. If we start stuff immediately, everything gets delayed actually in the end. Yeah, not very intuitive. So what do we do about this?
Call Klaus
or Dan.
or Dan.
Maybe a nice idea.
Yeah.
I think we covered quite a lot about system stability now, right? So, to our watchers, to our viewers, what is something they should do starting tomorrow? Do you have some kind of concrete tip?
I do. Well, I mean, first thing, obviously, if you're not limiting work in progress, if you're not doing that, even if the limiting work in progress is from the perspective of don't start something until you finish something, right? To me, that's a perfectly valid way to start out with limiting work in progress. But at least pay attention to the number of things that you're working on right now, and at least have some consciousness, if you will, of how many things you're working on, so that you're not pulling too much stuff in. So to me, that's I was going to say that's number one, but not, whatever. But the second thing, more importantly, if you're not paying attention to the age of items in your process, that's one thing that you should do. I mean, my guess is most people are oblivious to how long they've been working on something.
Yeah.
Most teams just really are. And it's really, really simple to pay attention to age. All you need to do is you need to track, when you pull something into your process, just track a timestamp. When did I pull that in? And every day during your stand-up or whenever you meet, just talk about how long have all these items been in progress? And if they've been in longer than what we'd like them to be, maybe we should take some action. Right?
Yeah. Okay, that sounds like some concrete steps you could do starting from tomorrow, right? So, limit your work in progress and calculate your age of work in progress.
Correct.
Thanks a lot for your time, Dan.
Thank you, Klaus. Thank you.
I think we should go to the beach now, right?
I think we should. We should have drinks or something.
We should have
whatever,
drinks
right
here.
Yeah.
Next
time for the next video.
For the next video.
We're gonna have to do this video all over again, guys. Just stop watching and see the next one. Right? Okay.
Cool.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye. Okay, so camera is rolling. Is it rolling or running?
Rolling.
Rolling, like
rolling.
rolling on the river.
You got it.
Okay.
Tina. Gotta make sure I don't